The defiling of a podcast is an ancient human tradition, Abu. Why should we be an exception?
If I am to help you, I need bullet-pointed feedback. Why are we editing this?
Plosives. They have come over us just when we thought them gone forever. How sweet these last few minutes of recording are.
With RX9D plosive? But surely you cannot...
Plugins are never enough, Moneo. Moneo's a young podcaster. He's like, buy all the plugins, everything's good.
Right. I'll fix it in post with my plugins.
Slap 1,000 plugins per channel.
Pro tip, y'all.
Yeah.
Fix the issue at the source.
How about this? Pro tip, get good, idiot.
Get good. Just do better.
You notice me? No windscreen, very few plosives, because I direct all of my air around the microphone.
That's right. Yeah, you're an airbender. Become an airbender.
Easy.
And you won't have to edit plosives.
It's true, unless you laugh this way. Welcome to Gom Jabbar, your guide to the iconic world of Dune. We'll be exploring the themes, philosophies, and characters found in the sandy depths of this vast universe. From Frank Herbert's groundbreaking novels to the adaptations on film and TV. My name is Leo.
And my name's Abu.
Oh, and today on the show...
Oh.
Were you hoping for more God Emperor of Dune?
I hope you were.
Oh, dear listener, we have it on a plate. And we're
so much more.
We're going to spoon feed you these chapters of a big worm talking.
Yeah, forget breakfast in bed. God Emperor in bed.
God Emperor in bed. That's what I hope to be called someday. But before we get too far into it, let's take care of our housekeeping quickly. Spoiler warning. Hey,
yes.
None of them. None of them. Zero.
What do you
Just
know?
like complaints about how long Leto talks. Zero spoilers beyond the pages and books we've read thus far today.
That
Keep
is right.
Caught up. You're safe.
That's correct. Now, of course, a huge shout out to our Kwisatz Haderach level patron, Case Aiken.
Case.
You've been with us forever, buddy.
True.
Hang on a little bit longer, because this TED Talk / podcast, it's got more fuel in the tank. Trust me.
I think 1 million minutes, almost.
1 million minutes.
1 million minutes. I did the
That's
math.
right.
I think it actually might be close to 1 million minutes. Thank you, Case.
Thank you so much, Case, for your support. As a quick note, some of y'all might notice that we didn't say Matthew Good, who has also been a long-time Kwisatz Haderach patron.
Indeed.
He sent us this lovely message on Patreon explaining that circumstances have changed and he is dropping down from Kwisatz Haderach to a lower support level. And I was like, bro, you don't need to explain anything to me. Like,
Yeah.
Your support has been so generous these past few months. So we just want to extend another thank you as well to Matthew for being a longtime Kwisatz Haderach member and for supporting us these many months. He is still a patron. He is still supporting us, but just at a different tier. And that's A-okay, because our thank you, our gratitude, our love extends to all of our patrons and hell, all of our listeners and hell, everyone who doesn't even listen.
Well, okay. They get them fucking on board, but yeah.
Yeah, once they're on board, then our gratitude will extend to them as well.
No, I hope it's unspoken, but you should be giving as a patron in a place that's comfortable for you. And
yes,
if you're able to, amazing. You make what we do possible, not even exaggerating. And if you don't give now and you're able to, consider becoming a patron. But seriously, for anybody who's chosen to become a patron, it means the world. We do not take it for granted. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your support.
Now, today's game plan, it's not going to shock you. It's not going to surprise you because it's the same as always. We're going to start off with a summary of today's chapters, and then we're going to dive into a couple of takeaways, and then we have some yummy
feed me
spice morsels to feed Abu, who is now the plant from Little Shop of Horrors. Feed me, Seymour. But before we do that, we're going to take a quick break. So don't go anywhere. We've got our chapter summaries right after this.
Welcome back, folks. Let's dive into today's chapters and talk about chapters 31 and 32, starting with 31. I guess that makes sense, right? We should start with that one.
Strong choice.
All right. Our first chapter today
Yep.
begins shortly after the betrothal announcement. It has now been made public that Hui Nori will be wedding the God Emperor. And we actually join Leto once again in his audience chamber, once again about to have a meeting, this one with a furious Moneo, who is storming into the audience chamber.
Yeah.
As it turns out, the whole empire knows about this betrothal, and Moneo, our guy, the major domo, was the fucking last one to find out.
He didn't get a save the date. That hurts. That stings. Right. Yeah.
He found out through an Instagram post.
Oh, shit. That's the worst.
So rude. So rude.
Every one of his friends was tagged in a photo. He was like,
Yeah.
Nayla was there.
Nayla? You sent Nayla a personal handwritten invite? So, to be fair to the Major Domo, he has been very busy handling the affairs of the Empire, back and forth between the Citadel and Own, doing his Major Domo shit. And so he has just now learned about this wedding announcement, and he's concerned, he's scared, he's furious, he's really thrown off kilter. The main thing that's getting to him is this concern about Leto's reputation, right?
Right.
What does this wedding mean for the God Emperor? Because gods just don't marry any old ambassadors. What are people going to start saying about you? In fact, Moneo has even started to hear gossip in the city already.
Yeah, and there's even gossip among the fish speakers.
Right.
Like Leto calls them during Sihanouk, "You are my only brides."
Uh-oh.
And now they're like, "Yeah, but I feel like you now have an actual bride." Are we supposed to be jealous? Hey, other fish speakers, how are we feeling on this? Is this?
Yeah. Right. His ultra loyal, fanatical, all-female army that he calls his brides are suddenly second to this other woman who will be his actual bride. It raises a lot of questions. So Moneo certainly has a point here. But very characteristically, Leto is completely unbothered.
Yeah.
Quote, "The defiling of the god is an ancient human tradition, Moneo. Why should I be an exception?" End quote.
Yeah.
And so Moneo takes a moment to calm himself, right? He comes in guns blazing and notices Leto be totally calm about this. So he takes a beat and he tries to understand Leto's decision. Why marry this Ixian ambassador who he's only just met recently? Like, it can't have been more than a couple of weeks since the two have met.
Yeah, he also learned like 3 days ago that Tloi Laxu are how she got made.
Right.
Like,
there's a lot of red
there's
flags.
so many reasons not to trust her.
Yeah.
And I'll say really quickly, we like brush past it, and even they brush past it. But Moneo brings up a good point. This is a rallying cry for Leto's enemies.
Yes.
This is a thing that they can use to become a stronger unified front. Right. And it's something that just isn't addressed in the rest of the chapter. Like, they very much focus on the other stuff. But I'm like, okay, of all the shit that Moneo said, because he clearly doesn't know everything that's going on, that's probably the most valid complaint.
Right.
Like, yo, there was an assassination attempt fucking 48 hours ago.
Yeah.
Do you forget the whole bombing incident? How do you think this is going to affect that, Leto? Come on, dude.
Yeah, absolutely. Moneo's utterly confused. And again, Leto completely nonchalant about it.
Right.
But he does try to explain. He explains to Moneo that the reason is because, quote, emotions. They have come over me just when I thought them gone forever. How sweet these last few sips of humanity are. End quote.
Wow.
Goosebumps.
Foreshadowing. Also, foreshadowing. He mentions again in this chapter his 4,000 years lifespan.
Right.
But he's talking like third act. Like, it sounds like he's talking third act here. These last few sips of humanity. Yeah.
Whew. Yeah, it's a powerful statement. And In classic Leto fashion, he goes on and continues to explain in sort of a mini TED talk about how this concept of the flesh and thought and emotions are all pillars of what make us human. And he warns that, quote, if we deny emotion, we lose all touch with our internal universe. It was emotions which I missed the most, end quote. And that's so telling. And honestly, that makes me feel very sympathetic toward Leto.
Yeah.
We have talked at length about this physical transformation that he's undergoing. We've also talked about how his humanity is sort of dissolving or at least changing into something that's no longer human. Leto recognizes that about himself, and he genuinely misses being human. He misses his old life, and emotions were certainly part of that. And Hui, for the first time in countless years, makes him feel very strong emotions, which we see examples of throughout the book.
Yeah. We see him all the time being sort of an emotionally aloof kind of troll,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
fucking with people.
Yes.
And the fact that he's admitting, I missed caring. Like, I am a sociopath. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
But it's not by choice. And I miss caring. I miss having emotions.
Yep.
Later in the chapter, he gets angry and goes, whoa,
How
look at
fun.
that. Whoa, that's fun. Or I
Yeah.
think Duncan asks him a question in the next chapter, and he's
Right.
like, whoa.
Right. He
wow,
has
I'm
this
angry.
urge to yell, which he hasn't had in like thousands of years. You know?
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a very powerful statement and very informative of
Right.
Leto the God Emperor.
Yeah.
And Moneo also sympathizes, right? He's not like cold-hearted about this. And he reiterates, I'm only mad, God Emperor, because I'm worried about you. I'm angry because I'm concerned. It's coming from a place of love because I would do anything for you, right? I would risk my life for you. The God Emperor, your mission, the Golden Path is my priority.
Right.
And he just doesn't know how to react to this Leto. He's never seen the God Emperor so emotional before
Right.
and expressing these emotions before, at least in Moneo's lifetime. Now, in a shockingly tender moment between the two of them, Leto tells Moneo that for the first time in centuries, he's starting to feel lonely unless Hui is there. Whenever she's gone, he wishes she was back, which is very cute. For those of us that have been in love, we know that feeling.
Yeah.
And Moneo falls silent here. He's touched by this revelation, and we get this really beautiful detail that I wanted to call out. Quote, surely Moneo could understand the absence of the intimate sharing in love. His expression betrayed as much. For the first time in a long while, Leto noted how much Moneo had aged. End quote.
Yeah.
Whew. Pretty strong hints here that Moneo, at some point in his life, very likely had a lover, and it's clearly someone that he misses deeply, and maybe someone that he misses so much and loved so much that he has never remarried ever since, because obviously the Moneo we meet in this book is single.
Right.
But of course, he must have had a partner with whom he had Siona at some point in his life. And based on Moneo's reaction here, it seems like he really loved that person.
Yeah, we just don't know. Like, we just don't know about Moneo's life. But I also liked Leto mentioned how quickly they age. Just how quickly it happened that this, probably someone he remembers as being a young child, a baby, in the arms of some fish speaker, maybe, has now become his major domo and is now old and gray.
Yeah.
And Leto's like, yeah, it's been just a few years, it seems like. Wow.
Yeah. Right. Time, of course, for Leto works differently than it does for the rest of us.
True.
Now, in this moment, sort of staying in this really tender moment between the two, Leto also recognizes how much he cares for Moneo. I found this so beautiful.
Yeah.
He has this thought about the major domo. Quote, he has the full spectrum, doubt to trust, love to hate, everything. All of those dear qualities which come to fruition in the warmth of emotion, in the willingness to spend yourself on life. End quote. Capital L life at the end there. And it's twofold here, in my opinion. Leto is recognizing how much he cares for and loves Moneo. But also, I sense a little bit of envy here as well.
Yeah.
Moneo gets the full spectrum of emotions, gets to spend capital L life, something that in many regards is denied to Leto.
Yeah. Like if we're talking about spending yourself on life, it's a currency that's just denied the God Emperor.
Yeah.
So, yeah, absolutely. Also, just what a beautiful encapsulation. He says Moneo like fits perfectly into that niche of humanity that he cares so much about.
It makes me quite emotional. Reading that, I was just like, damn, they love each other so much. It's so beautiful. God Emperor and Major Domo, you know. Name a more iconic duo.
The most well-known, yeah. Batman and Robin who?
Who?
Sorry, is that the giant worm and the aging hot man?
Leto and Moneo forever. Now, as an amusing aside, while all this like beautiful, tender, emotional conversation is happening, Duncan is outside the fucking audience chamber, like causing a fucking riot. Like he is so pissed. He wants to talk to Leto, and Leto just like pushes the remote control and closes the door on Duncan. And he and Moneo continue the ruckus, the absolute wild noises coming from outside the audience chamber, and they continue chatting.
Yeah.
It's kind of a funny moment, but I think even though it's a bit of a humorous aside, I also think it once again shows us how important these two people are to each other. They are giving each other their undivided attention in this moment because Leto recognizes Moneo needs that right now. This also sets up the next chapter, of course, when Duncan does come raging in like a bull, which we'll get to shortly.
We also see Moneo, like, of course, Leto, unbothered by everything. But
Yes.
even Moneo's, like, hearing the Duncan Gola fucking raising a ruckus.
Yeah.
And the doors close, and he's like, anyway, so what's the... Yeah, that's probably
Right.
Duncan. Yeah, I probably heard about the wedding. Anyway, so
Yeah.
what are we talking about? Like, what's the next thing?
Yeah.
Utterly focused on his job and getting things done.
Right. And look, Moneo's a professional, right? He came into this meeting flustered and confused and concerned and pissed off. But now this wedding is a go. It's going to happen no matter what. And it's his job as the major domo to make it happen. So the conversation gets down to the business of throwing a party, y'all. And hilariously, while Moneo is trying to get down to business, he's got his notepad out and he's like, okay, tell me everything that needs to get done. Leto is literally in his own head monologuing about the power of words and the fallacy of believing in a universe of absolute cause and effect. And Moneo finally calls him out. He's done this many times with Moneo throughout the book, and This is the first time Moneo's like, hold on a second.
Yeah.
Quote, Lord, it disturbs me deeply when you don't pay attention. End quote. And this leads to Leto defining the term wool gathering for Moneo, which I thought was also such a funny sort of tender moment between the two.
Yeah.
And Moneo will actually use it later in the chapter because he takes a liking to the word. He calls
like, that's a good ass word.
Yeah.
Hey,
He's like,
I like
wool
that
gathering, love it.
Yeah.
So once again, Moneo's like, all right, anyway, wool gathering, thank you for the vocab lesson. What about the wedding? You know, tell me what's going to happen here. And Leto's like, nope, I'm not done talking about wool gathering yet. Quote, you'd be surprised what comes of idle thinking, Moneo. I've never minded spending an entire day on things a human would not bother with for 1 minute. Why not? With my life expectancy of some 4,000 years, what's 1 day more or less? How much time does one human life count? 1,000,000 minutes? I've already experienced almost that many days. End quote.
I just wanted to point out, so that's mind-boggling, right? Like that
Truly,
comparison of a human life is in minutes is what Leto's experienced in days. It's not hard math. He's full of shit. This is way off.
Way off.
First of all, 1,000,000 minutes is like 2 years. It's just under 2 years. Second of all, 1,000,000 days is like 2,740-ish years.
Yeah.
So not only is that not even close to what a human life counts? Like,
Right.
by a huge margin. He's also lived a lot longer than that.
Yeah,
and he's
he's
saying,
shortchanging
I've
himself.
almost lived that many. It's like, fuck you, man. You've lived way more than that. I can't tell. Like, clearly, Frank Herbert could have just done the math.
Right.
And he probably did. This guy is looking up Cachulan number systems for his ancient
totally.
friend. He does the research, and this is just algebra. So the question is, like, why the fuck is Leto so wrong? Is he making, like, a joke to himself? Like, he's being hyperbolic, and he knows that Moneo is just going to go, wow, big numbers. Or is he just so lost touch with, yeah, humans live, what, 2 years?
Yeah. Well, how much could a banana
Shit.
cost?
I was thinking hamsters. God, my mistake. Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it a $10 a banana? I don't know. I'm a
Right.
billionaire. I have no
He's
clue.
just so out of touch with like time, how time works, and that, like maybe it could be revealing in that way. It could also just be because a million sounds like a very big, awe-inspiring number, and it's like easy to round to.
Is it when your dad killed 61 billion people? You're right. Like, if I said I lived 1,000,000 minutes, it'd be like, whoa.
Wow,
but
cool.
like when your father killed 61 billion people, it's
Yeah.
like only 1,000,000? That seems
Right.
like not that many.
Okay, but you got to pump those numbers up later.
Those numbers up.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think it's a bit of column A, a bit of column B is where my headcanon sort of is with that.
Sure. Yeah.
I think ultimately I'm with Moneo in my reaction, though,
Sure.
because the numbers are still mind-boggling no matter how you slice them.
Yeah.
And it really puts the scale of Leto's life and Leto's experience in perspective and how non-human it is. The average human is not going to have 1,000,000 days in their life. It's awe-inspiring no matter which way you slice it.
Totally. Yeah.
So, wrapping up with chapter 31, we finally get to planning this damn wedding, and it turns out Leto just wants a very simple occasion. It'll be at Tabur Village, and he only wants the fish speakers and some folks from the aristocracy to attend, including Moneo and Siona.
Right.
And Moneo has his notepad out. He's taking notes furiously because for the first time in this conversation, he's not flustered. He's in control because, oh boy, he's got a task now, and he's excited to do his job. He's very good at doing that.
Right.
And so now that he's sort of been pointed in a direction, he's on task. At the end of the chapter, as Moneo leaves, Leto observes how his major domo is actually stuck in his very aristocratic ways and aristocratic thinking. He's always clinging to the status quo and the past.
Right.
Quote, "He is looking ahead now," Leto thought, "but even this new thing will pass. He will turn toward the past once more, and I had such high hopes for him once. Well, perhaps Siona." End quote.
Yeah. It's such an interesting condemnation of maybe Moneo's like ultimate shortcoming.
Yeah.
Which is that for like all of his intelligence and his ability to do stuff and his wisdom and his experience and all of these qualities, at the end of the day, he is the sort of person who will reflect inevitably back on his life and look to the past for guidance in the future.
Yeah.
Which is totally out of line with Leto's golden path.
Yeah.
Really fascinating.
Fascinating.
Especially because he used to be a rebel, right? Like in the heart of rebellion is what has been and what is not good enough. Let's change
Right.
it.
Right. But also, all rebels are closeted aristocrats.
That's true. Leto has so many thoughts on things. Well, that carries us into chapter 32, where we get a whole lot more thoughts.
Yes.
A lot of Leto thinking and talking about stuff. And this time, it's Duncan's chance to
Yes.
storm angrily into the chamber.
Amazing.
So mad. He's stomping his little feet. And Leto's like, wow, he angy. He really angy. And Leto recognizes immediately what's going on with Duncan, who's kind of grappling with an existential dilemma all of the Golas struggle with, called Synth Syndrome. Be a good electronica band. Quote, The Golas often nurtured suspicions about the secret things which might have been developed across the centuries of oblivion since they last knew awareness. What had people been doing all that time? Why could they possibly want me, this relic from their past? No ego could overcome such doubts forever, especially in a doubting man. End quote. Which, yeah, no ego. You have to clarify because Duncan's got an ego, but he's also a doubting man. So it's something that just claims them eventually. This also gives us a little bit of an idea of what that catalyst is for almost every Gola that we've learned about.
Right.
Maybe this sense syndrome is that spark that lights the fire.
Totally.
And Leto is spot on in his like quick draw analysis of Duncan's mental state.
Yeah.
Because Duncan's scanning the room, checking the space, making sure, and also staring down Leto. And his thoughts are not a well-structured, organized, analysis of the information he's taking in. He's literally questioning, quote, "Am I really here?"
Oh my God.
He wondered. Is this me? What are these thoughts that I think? End quote. Duncan took a big old capsule of mushrooms. He's just, what is thought? What is consciousness?
Right. That is a scary break with reality. Wow.
Yeah. He's one of the universe's best swordsmen, and he's like, what is this room? What are thoughts? What is the sword? It's fascinating.
Yeah. Scary place to be in.
Especially for a not thinky man. He doesn't really strike me as a heady individual.
Certainly.
Now, unlike previous Golas, however, this Duncan accuses Leto of something a bit different. And this was kind of a charming moment because Leto's like, here we go again.
Right.
Okay,
right.
Synth Syndrome time. Woo! Most boring episode of the season. And he's kind of tuning out. His eyes glaze over. And Duncan says, quote, "You've committed a crime against us, Leto. Against all of us. The Golas you resurrect without ever asking us if that's what we want." End quote.
Damn.
What? And Leto's like, whoa.
Plot twist.
That's not in the script. Was this? Yeah, this episode was directed by M. Night Shyamalan. That's crazy. Did not see that coming. What a profound twist. And it's interesting also to see that Duncan is expressing this camaraderie with all of these past Golas.
Yeah.
He sees all of the Golas as a sort of team against the universe, which is kind of a weird existential thought. Like, are you the past Golas? Are you on the same team? Do you know them? Do you care?
Right.
I don't know. It's the sort of therapy session that probably every Gola deserves as part of their experience.
Is your past Gola's wife and children in Goigoa also your extended family, maybe?
Yeah.
What is that?
What do you call them? Hey there, not my son. You want to toss a baseball? Yeah. There's some real questions there that don't really have good answers.
Yeah.
And he explains that the crime Leto has committed against all of the Golas is that he took away the magic of life.
Yeah.
The magic of kind of knowing that this is all there is and we should make the most of it, right?
Right.
When you have 99 lives in a video game, what does it mean to fall into that spike pit one more time?
Yeah.
Like consequence, life, value, meaning. I don't think there have been some broader philosophical conversations in the last 20 years about like, as medical science gets closer to solving things like dying of old age, what does death mean and what value does it give to life? But that is sort of this ongoing philosophical debate that you can fall on either side of, saying, well, death is what gives life meaning. And the Golas are being denied that constantly. Not only do they have the trauma of dying, they don't get to value the time they have because it's all at the whims of this other being. It's just, it's brutal.
It's brutal. And again, he's sort of thinking in a continuum, which I get the sense that maybe not all the Golas think this way. And perhaps this is why it's so new to Leto. He's thinking in this continuum of we remember dying and then one of us wakes up again. The next of us wakes up again. with the memory of the death. And we all wake up with this same death, presumably like defending Paul Atreides in the first book, or being killed by Stilgar in the third book, depending on your interpretation of which memory. But that's not a normal human experience, to know you died and then to know you came back. And so I certainly love Duncan's accusation here that Leto has taken the magic out of life. The thing that makes life precious is knowing that it will no longer exist at some point. And I think when you remove that aspect, or when you introduce this aspect of, oh, well, actually, I just keep bringing you back.
Yeah.
It certainly makes Duncan wonder, like, who am I? Why am I here? Like, all of those questions that are running through his mind make sense when you think of it that way.
Yeah. I think you're right, too, that this all feels very new to the Gola pattern.
Right.
And we know Duncan as kind of an impulsive, very strategy-oriented. He's very, like, get shit done himself. And maybe he gets overly drunk on spice beer every once in a while.
Yeah.
But he's the sort of guy you can send to a desert planet to connect with the natives and trust that he's going to get it done. But he's not like your right-hand man philosopher.
Right.
He's not the troubadour that Gurney is.
Right.
So the fact that this one is thinking these much longer range thoughts is really interesting.
Definitely.
And maybe also is a piece of this whole puzzle as it falls together.
For sure.
Now, Leto changes the subject and asks, so, what are you doing here, Duncan? You came from the Citadel, right? You rushed over here, broke the speed limit. I'm not going to ticket you for it, but it's worth noting. And Duncan's like, well, I heard about the fucking wedding.
Uh-oh.
And in a genuinely shocking aside, we get this little element from Duncan's perspective regarding Hui Nari.
Yeah.
And we knew that he was like, kind of taken with her, and like,
she's
oh,
cute.
Wow,
she's I've seen her
luminous
around in the
brown hair.
hallways. Yeah.
Looks a little bit like a Tleilaxu abomination. I'd still hit it.
Right, smash.
It's like, yeah, smash, swipe right. But in Duncan's perspective, this is the quote. Quote, there was no honest reality in these times. No peace except in the presence of Hui. All else was insanity. End quote.
Wow. Yikes.
Yeah. That's some deep feeling.
Yeah.
He's having this existential crisis, and Hui is the only thing. Everything else is insanity. Hui is the only place where he finds peace.
Yeah.
He's met her fucking twice for like 20 minutes.
Right.
For everything that Leto is, the ground rules Leto has established. Hey, don't talk to her. Don't look at her. Don't get near her. There seems to be some progress here.
Yeah.
In Duncan's internal
Definitely.
world.
And it's interesting to note that Hui seems to ground Leto for the same reason she's grounding Duncan. And it's her honesty, right?
Yeah.
Hui couldn't be nothing but empathetic and honest and open and true to herself. That is how she's made to be. And both Duncan and Leto find that extremely attractive and also extremely reassuring.
It's actually kind of worth considering because both Leto and Duncan operate with this sort of Atreidian value of you build loyalty through loyalty, and you build loyalty through that genuine trust that you build up as part of that contract that they talk about. And I wonder if we would be as intoxicating a presence for someone like Paul or someone like Ganima or someone like Alia. Mm-hmm. Like, would we be as grounding for all of those Atreidian folk who come from that same moral background of like, no. Like, at the end of the day, even among all of the assassination attempts and the tigers and the stone burners and all that shit, someone who is like Hui is the sort of person that you treasure.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Who knows?
Just a possibility. And Duncan asks Leto if he trusts her. So do you trust Hui? And clearly he is projecting a little bit of his own feelings into this conversation. Quote, trust is what goes with a pledge of loyalty, Idaho said. Such as the trust between you and me, Leto asked. End quote.
Ooh.
Which is such a good clapback. Just such a good, like, cool. Yeah, agreed. So we trust each other, right? And Duncan's like, oh,
fuck.
oh, maybe.
He called me out.
what if you don't trust me? And Leto goes, then I can't trust anybody. What if I don't trust you? Leto's like, then I have pity for
Right.
you.
And then that's a damn shame. Yeah.
Bro.
It's a really tense
yeah.
moment where they're on the surface talking about Hui Nori and this wedding and trust and love and whatever.
Yeah.
But what they're really talking about underneath all of that is their own relationship with each other and how much they trust or don't trust each other.
Yeah. And I think, as always, Leto has the benefit of being able to be basically honest, although he dodges questions left and right all the time.
Yeah.
Because it's true. Like, if Duncan can't trust the God Emperor who's guiding humanity to safety on the Golden Path, then bad shit might happen for that Duncan.
Right.
As it's happened so many times before.
Right.
So, yeah, it's an intense conversation. Now, Duncan first checks to make sure, they can't hear us outside, right? And Leto's like, yeah, they can't hear us. Duncan's like, cool. Moneo was fucking pissed. Are you kidding me? That dude was so worked up. Leto's like, yeah, it was wild. Duncan's like, but you controlled him in, like, on the way out, he was docile.
Yeah.
Like, how do you do that?
Yeah.
And Leto's like, I don't do that. What are you talking about? Like, I understand him, but he controls himself. Like, he makes those choices for himself. And this leads to kind of a long-winded conversation about aristocrats and the aristocracy,
Right.
which is one of our takeaways today. So stay tuned for that. But overall, Duncan's still having trouble kind of buying all of it.
Yeah.
Which, to be fair, he is, as has been pointed out in this chapter, a doubting man.
Indeed.
And he be doubting, as he always is. Now, this chapter wraps up as Duncan finishes venting his anger and ultimately recommits his vow of service to the Atreides. Quote, after a long silence, Idaho said, I have given you my oath. That is important to me. It is still important. I don't know what you're doing or why. I can only say I don't like what's happening. There. I've said it. End quote.
Got him.
Got him. Yeah. So, good one.
Yeah.
Duncan. Just boo.
Right.
Anyway, I'm going to go back to following your orders.
Yeah. I will say, this feels like a very therapeutic moment. Like, Duncan came in here overwhelmed and confused and angry. And at the end of the day, we know he's loyal to the Atreides, and that is the thing he values above all else. That is the thing that defines Duncan Idaho. But he had to come in here and vent. Like, he was carrying this weight, and he just had to come in and be like, I don't know what the fuck is going on, and I don't know what you're fucking up to.
Yeah.
And I don't like it. But I'm going to go finish that expense report you need from me. You know, like, it almost feels like a moment. It feels like a moment all of us want to, like, have with our manager some days, where we're just like, I don't fucking know what this company's doing, and this is bullshit, and I'm so blah blah blah. Anyway, I'm gonna go do my job now. So it just feels like Duncan really getting some feelings off his chest for sure.
It's also interesting that the resolution of this emotionally tumultuous meeting is him grounding himself in facts.
Yeah.
I have given you my oath.
Check.
That is important to me.
Check.
It is still important.
Check.
I don't know what you're doing.
Check.
I don't know why you're doing it.
Check.
But I don't like it.
Check.
Done. And it's a very Duncan moment for him to say, here are facts that I can work with, that I know about.
Right.
Now that we're on the same table of those facts, I'm gone.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Yeah.
And Leto goes, you going back to the Citadel? He's like, what other frontier is there, asshole?
Right, where the fuck else am I supposed to go?
Yeah, where else, Leto? His business is done. Now, coincidentally, Hui is going there tonight, basically, which, okay. And then Leto's going tomorrow. And Leto orders Duncan, hey, Duncan says, I want to get to know Hui better.
Yeah, I guess if she's going to be your wife, I should get to know her.
I guess,
something.
I should probably be friends with her or whatever.
Do you
And
have a
Leto's
number?
like, yo, hey, fuck, hey. Hey, don't, hey, stop. Don't do it. Don't talk to her. She's not for you, he says. Duncan takes this as well as any middle schooler.
Yeah.
And throws out one last jab. Quote, I've always known there were witches, Idaho said. Your grandmother was one, end quote.
Got him!
Oh, shit! Damn, bringing out the granny jokes.
Damn, brutal.
That being said, jokes aside, speaking of Goigoa, now that we know Duncan probably had feelings for Jessica, it feels like it has a double meaning, or it like feels that it has like another layer to it, you know?
I think to me it just makes it more childish, right? It's just like the first insult his brain could come up with in that moment, where he's just like, well, your grandma was one. Huh! And then he turns around and walks out, you know? Like,
It's possible, you know, another reading possibly. Let's say a witch, you know, kind of this woman who enchants you. You don't understand how she does it,
yeah.
but she just casts a spell on you and you can't stop thinking about her.
Uh-huh.
He's always known there were witches. Jessica was one of them. And bringing it up now, it sounds like he's saying Hui is also a witch,
right,
who has cast this spell on him.
Right.
But this is new Duncan. This is Duncan who isn't following the old rules. I don't know. Maybe he's saying, I missed my chance with Jessica. I'm not going to miss my chance now. And maybe that's his defiance.
Ooh, that's a fun way to read into it. Yeah.
I don't know. It just feels like now that we know from earlier in this book that he had feelings for Leto's grandmother, it feels too intentional. But I don't know. That's I accidentally had tinfoil on my head just then. Let me get that off. Nevertheless, the chapter basically wraps up. I did want to say there was this final line, right?
Yeah.
Leto points out the oldest man and the youngest both in one flesh.
Right.
And I actually legitimately thought when we ended the last episode that this was talking about Leto, because I'm like, yeah, he has all of time.
Right.
And he's also a child who just fell in love for the first time. So the fact that this is Leto talking about Duncan was kind of a beautiful duality. He says how like a little boy he is about Duncan. But in some ways, Leto is older than Duncan. He has memories of being a full-grown man 80,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago. He has more time in experience than anyone else has ever had ever. So in some ways, he's older. In other ways, Duncan, as a Gola even, has fallen in love and has lived an adult life. He's had sex. He's like been a man.
Yeah.
And Leto's frozen in this perpetual state of being a 9-year-old or a 10-year-old or whatever the fuck.
Yeah.
So Leto calling Duncan the oldest and the youngest kind of, to me, reeks as his inability to think clearly about himself, going, oh, how like a little boy he is, he said, like a little boy would. But also, it's possible that Leto is intentionally kind of, maybe even cynically saying, we're quite alike in that way. He's literally saying, stay away from my crush, hot guy.
Right.
Hey, hot man,
Right.
Don't talk to the girl I like. And the hot man's like, well, your grandma's a fucking witch. And then they leave. And it's like, yeah, this is middle school.
Right. It's the pettiest, like, back and forth.
Juvenile, like, idiots fighting over this girl.
Right. What'd you say about my mama? Say it to my face.
Say it to my long worm body. It's immune to lasers. Shoot me. So anyway, I just wanted to point out, it's kind of a beautiful last line.
It is.
But it does have, I think, kind of that dual meaning of Leto reflecting on himself, but also maybe drawing a comparison, or maybe just being totally blind to his own youngness when it comes to emotion. He's like, oh my God, I felt anger today. what a rush.
Yeah. That's an interesting interpretation of those final lines, Leo. Clearly you read into it much more deeply than I did. I read that and I was like, yeah, he's a man out of his time or something, so he's old and young at the same time. Anyway, that was as far as my thought process went. But you clearly took the time to think about it, and I love your headcanon there.
Oh, I appreciate it. Listen, teamwork makes the dream happen.
That's right.
So
That's right.
We got this.
Alrighty, well, that's our chapter summaries for today, chapters 31 and 32. Let's take a quick breather, take a second to digest what we've just read. But don't go anywhere, folks, because we still have more to talk about in our takeaways. So we'll see you in just a minute.
Welcome back, everybody. Hope you enjoyed your break. Hope you didn't get cornered in a juvenile diss-off with a 7-meter worm man. Let's talk about our takeaways from today. And our first takeaway today is the aristocrats.
Yeah.
The Aristocats. Oh.
I've never seen that movie, actually.
I think I've seen it. I don't know. But I know there's like a crazy joke that ends with the aristocrats. Anyway.
Yeah, let's dig into this idea of the aristocrat, which is a topic that Leto brings up with both Moneo and Duncan in today's reading.
Yeah.
So if we return to his conversation with Moneo, there's the moment where the major domo is expressing his concern about these obscenities, these rumors that he's already hearing, and he's worried about what will be spoken against Leto because of this marriage with Winori. And Moneo ultimately declares that it's too dangerous. We can't let this happen. This would be too dangerous. And Leto wryly thinks to himself, quote, "The ultimate verdict of conservatism," end quote. Yeah. And, ooh, boy, I loved that moment because it's such recognizable energy there, right? It is the okay boomer of the Dune universe. Like, Moneo is giving off very boomer vibes. And his declaration that this dramatic change is too dangerous and who knows what'll happen and it's too unexpected and new, that is something that a lot of younger generations have dealt with, right? This mindset from previous generations that younger generations have to push back against. Happens all the time.
Again, that's how rebels come to be.
That's how rebels come to be. And it even makes me think of conservative religious movements or conservative political movements, how they sort of prop up this idealized past that never really existed, right? They're looking back through rose-tinted glasses on a past that wasn't actually what they think it was.
Right.
And they'll prop that up while resisting an idealized future that could exist, right? Like, if change were to take place, maybe things could get better. Of course, we don't know. Maybe it's a little dangerous. Maybe it's a little risky. No, it was better back in the day, back in my day. This is a feeling I think we're all very familiar with. And if you're here in the States, I think circa 2016 is about when these feelings got really sort of brought home for you, right? Like the Trump presidency.
I have no idea what you're talking about. That.
I was like, why am I skirting around it? I should just say it. Like, the Trump presidency, the rise of conservative ideology, extreme conservative ideology in the States, all of that feels very real. And here we see Moneo thinking along those aristocratic, conservative, old-fashioned lines. This new thing you're doing, Leto, is too dangerous. It's too risky.
Now, in that same vein, right? Later, Duncan observes that Moneo had stormed into the room furious, but walked out completely docile.
Ooh.
He had had his sedatives. And Leto explains why. Quote, "Moneo is an aristocrat. He is married to duty, to responsibilities. When he is reminded of these things, his anger vanishes." End quote.
Yeah.
Kind of reminds me of the pledging allegiance to the flag and not the people of the country or like the values of the country. It's just to that. It's to that icon. It's to this idea. His marriage is to duty, to responsibilities, not necessarily to reason or like the heart of why you even have those duties or why you have those responsibilities. Yes. You're put into your position because the God Emperor put you there, and now you're like doubting the God Emperor in pursuit of those responsibilities as you understand them. It's an interesting cognitive dissonance.
For sure.
Or like a...
And of course, duty and responsibility, very conservative leaning ideas, right? Those are ideals that typically people who identify as conservative as things to aspire toward. Duty to country, responsibility to your neighbor, whatever that may be. And there's nothing wrong with those concepts, but I think there is something wrong with blindly adhering to those concepts without knowing why.
Yeah, I can't help but think of like quiet quitting and all the people going, "Don't quiet quit." It's like fucking why?
Why?
There's like
You know?
multi-trillion-dollar companies
Right.
taking, it's like effectively wage slave labor. It's wild. And if Moneo were more of like in the liberal side of things, he probably would have been like, "I did just enough today, Leto." Leto's like, "Thank you." He's like,
Amazing.
"Oh yeah, gonna do some shots tonight. That was great." Now, while Duncan accuses Leto of manipulating the major domo, Leto claims Moneo has locked himself into the past. This is a choice he's made. This is something he does. And
Okay.
Leto / very clearly Frank also observe at this moment that aristocrats always refuse their final duty to step aside. Oh my God, that's really, really topical right now.
Yep.
And have to be forced out. And good fucking Lord, another time we had, what's his name, Mitch McConnell?
Mitch McConnell.
Just freeze because he's 82.
Yeah.
Dude, have a fucking
have like
nap.
a stroke in like the middle of a press conference.
Go home. Rest. We all dream of retirement. You could. I'm pretty sure.
Retire.
Just retire, dude. God. The number of
Yeah.
ancient walking, technically alive, but probably not quite, basically reanimated corpses running the country is shocking. On both sides. Just across the board.
Yeah.
Not
Totally.
to be ageist or anything. Just
What's Biden, like 110 years old? Like, goddamn.
Biden is 340 years old, respectfully.
Right.
If you're not allowed to drive, maybe, I don't know, maybe governing isn't the thing. Anyway, doesn't matter. If it wasn't clear enough what Leto and Frank thought of aristocrats, Leto puts it pretty unequivocally. Quote, "Privilege becomes arrogance. Arrogance promotes injustice. The seeds of ruin blossom." End quote.
Boom.
It's almost a haiku. I'm like, wait. Arrogance promotes injustice. That's too many. The seeds of ruin blossom. Yeah, no, it's not. But
Close. Very close.
that's beautiful.
Yeah. We'll give it to him. We'll give it to him. His haiku on aristocrats.
It's an honorary haiku, yeah.
Yeah. I love it. And again, these ideas are so relevant today, right? Look at Congress.
Yeah.
Look at the career politicians who refuse to give up their seat. Look at how many times incumbents win over and over and over and over and over.
Yeah.
This is so spot on from Leto / Frank here, this observation that aristocrats will never do the final thing that is actually part of their duty.
Yeah.
For people who love duty and responsibility so much, the last thing they are supposed to do is step aside and hand the reins to a younger generation. And they don't. They have to be forced out.
You spend your whole life delegating, literally delegating to so many different people. And then comes time to delegate your job to someone who is better fit to do your job. And no, because it's not about that. It's about power. It's about control.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I think in this moment, Leto is perhaps recognizing this about Moneo as well.
Yeah.
That even Moneo, despite his good intentions, we all love Moneo. He's hot.
Yeah.
Even he, when it comes time to step aside and relinquish control, he won't be able to because it's the thing that defines him. Duty, responsibility, his work. He won't be able to. And he will need some sort of outside catalyst, some sort of force to make him step aside. Now, continuing with these ideas, fast forwarding in his conversation with Duncan, there's this chilling moment where Duncan asks Leto whether there is any frontier that he could run away to get away from all of this. What if he wants no fucking part of Leto's empire anymore?
Right.
Leto says, nope.
No. As it turns out, let me check. Let me check. Yeah, no.
Yep,
Duncan's like, you're not holding anything in that hand you just looked in.
Big fat
Leto's like,
no.
I don't know. I had it written here. Look, it says no on my hand.
Yeah. Which is terrifying, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is sort of a desperate, rattled Duncan in this chapter being like, can I just get away, man? Like, what if I change my name and retire to Japan? And he's just like, no, I'd still find you.
Yeah.
and you'd still be wrapped up in all of this. It's still part of the golden path. It's part of everything
Right.
because you are part of humanity.
Yeah. It really feels to me, not necessarily like I will find you, but that there is no escaping what you're trying to escape. Like what you are rebelling against in this moment. You might think it's me. You might think it's just the shit that's going on here. It's going on everywhere. And
Right.
even as humanity spread to different planets, we never separated. We never truly became distinct cells. We're all still just one
Right.
organism. And that's the problem.
Yes.
And that's why if there is a frontier where you can truly get away, you have to help me make it. We have
Right.
to make it together because I'm making it. It's called the Golden Path. Have you heard of it?
Yep, exactly. Excellent point. And you put that beautifully, that we are all still this single organism. And the risk with being a single homogeneous organism is that all it takes is one disease to wipe all of it out.
It's a monoculture. Yeah.
Monoculture. And yeah, I mean, obviously, Duncan's literally like, yo, is there like an address I can go to
Yeah.
to get away? And Leto's answering more philosophically in the sense of you cannot escape being human and being part of this organism.
Right.
Now, Duncan basically accuses Leto of being the reason humanity is so stuck, right? Like the reason humanity is so fenced in and resistant to expansion and change and breaking away from this organism is because of Leto's tyranny. That's what Duncan thinks.
Sure.
And Leto brings up Moneo here once again. He says, quote, he is quick to raise the traditional aristocratic barriers against all frontiers. You must understand the power of those barriers. They not only enclose planets and land on those planets, they enclose ideas. They repress change. End quote.
Yeah.
And Duncan is unconvinced. He's like, okay, so what? Like,
Yeah.
I'm an aristocrat, you're an aristocrat, we're all aristocrats. What the fuck?
Yeah.
And Leto continues to explain, quote, the surest sign that an aristocracy exists is the discovery of barriers against change, curtains of iron or steel or stone or of any substance which excludes the new, the different, end quote.
Yeah.
Which I loved that quote in particular because considering the real world facts that Frank lived through the Cold War, I think the use of curtains of iron in that quote
Yeah.
really stands out to me there because of the Iron Curtain and the Cold War and what all of that entails. I loved this idea.
Yeah.
This idea of like aristocracy, old-fashioned thinking, adherence to the past, conservative thinking, anything that excludes the new, the different. All of that is so in line with the larger themes of Dune. In essence, what Leto is saying here is that stagnation will kill us.
Yeah.
Aristocratic thinking is stagnation. We must be open to the new and the different. But people like Moneo are not, and thus they don't represent the future that I am creating.
Yeah. This is kind of a partially formed thought, but I'll try to get my way through it. But it almost feels also that Leto has a number of times called out the kind of intellectually dishonest branding that certain ideologies have, where aristocrats say, well, we have these benefits to our way of thinking, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, yes, but you've erected barriers that prevent change and growth and evolution, and that's what's going to kill us. And similarly, you say, well, the Ixians are creative. Aren't they creative? Hey, Ixians, you creative? And the Ixians are like, yeah, we're creative. And Leto goes, that's not true creativity because they keep secrets and they hide it and they lie and they obscure and they divert attention. And it's interesting then to see this pattern of him also saying, we have these broad ideas. And the problem is not always the idea in isolation. It's when that idea is channeled into things that cause stagnation, whether it's lies, those so that people cannot actually address them. God, there was such an interesting little quote, and I'll keep this as brief as possible. Trevor Noah talking about the difference in racism between South Africa and the United States, and how the biggest difference is that it is very hidden here, and that it is very openly said in South Africa. And so there is a kind of clarity to saying, you're being racist, and the government goes, yes, we're being racist. Yeah, you're not allowed to live in this area because you look the way you look. That's it. And you can fight against that. Versus in the US, you say, I'm not allowed to live in that neighborhood. And everyone goes, what are you talking about? Of course you can. Just apply
Right.
for a loan. And then the bank says, we're not going to give you a loan to live in that area.
Right.
And you go, why not?
Right.
And they go, well, you know, it's just, yeah. And you get all this bullshit and you can't do anything about it. And that feeling of, regardless of what people say on the surface, it's their actions and the way that they sort of inhabit this dynamic experience of living in a society that really reveals, I don't know.
Yeah, that's really well said. I mean, these are heady ideas
Yeah.
about humanity and stagnation and growth and aristocracy and conservatism. And a lot of it certainly feels like Frank getting some shit off his chest,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And a lot of it feels so relevant to today as well. Your example of Trevor Noah and the idea of racism being overt or sort of hidden and institutionalized.
Right.
Those are both equally racist things.
Yeah.
But one obviously is acknowledged and one is not.
One, you have to start by proving it exists before anyone will take you seriously. And it's like,
Exactly.
that's the uphill battle. But
yeah.
It feels aristocratic to hide prejudices and to hide those limitations within bureaucracy. Like
Yeah.
it feels that is what's resistant to change. If you say, here's the policy in black and white terms, and then people can collectively go, we don't like that, let's change it. Sure, that's
Right.
an agile way of leading a society, but hiding it under diffuse corporate policies that only certain people are going to encounter, and then they talk to their friends who don't look like them, and their friends go, well, I didn't have that problem. Did that really happen? It's like, it is a system that is hard to change because of the way that it's built, and that reeks of aristocracy. And to Leto's point,
it's still putting up barriers.
It's putting up barriers.
Whether like physical or invisible, the barriers are still there.
Yeah.
So to wrap up our exploration of aristocracy here in these chapters, we should acknowledge here at the end that Leto himself is actually the ultimate aristocrat.
Yeah.
And obviously, that is on purpose. At this point, we're sounding like a broken record. But by being the ultimate aristocrat, he will weed out the aristocratic mindset from humanity. That is his goal.
Right.
Leto even thinks about this cycle of aristocracy that has existed since the dawn of mankind. Here is the very dense thought that he has. Quote, pride of birth trails out in the penury and the weaknesses of interbreeding. The way is opened for pride of wealth and accomplishment. Enter the nouveau rich, riding to power as the Harkonnens did on the backs of the ancient regime. End quote. Now, on a first read, that's a very dense couple of sentences there and very confusing, but when you break it down, it's actually quite simple. I looked up the word penury. That means extreme poverty.
Yeah.
And so what he's effectively saying here, sort of taking it sentence by sentence, is that aristocratic family lines, sort of the way aristocracy used to be passed down, will eventually fail. And then this will open up ways for new aristocrats to rise to power, not based on their family ties, but based on their wealth and accomplishments. And then he gives the example of the Harkonnens doing that very same thing. We've also seen this aristocratic cycle literally happen within the books we are reading already. Because think back to the first book and the aristocratic family line of the Corrinos growing weak over thousands of years of rule and ultimately being overthrown by the accomplishments and the spice wealth of the combined forces of the Atreides and the Fremen. So we've continued to see that cycle happen, this aristocratic cycle that is ultimately dangerous to humanity, which is why Leto intends to break that cycle once and for all. It is a stagnant way of existing, which, of course, is all very much in line with his golden path. He will warn humanity to avoid a dangerous and stagnant pattern by being the ultimate example of that pattern, sort of beating them over the head with it.
Right.
And that's his ultimate point to Duncan as well here. I am the ultimate aristocrat. It is dangerous to think this way, to exist this way. Moneo is an example of an aristocrat, and those are the cycles I'm trying to break.
He even calls Duncan the aristocrat of the sword,
Right.
which I thought was so funny.
Right?
Duncan's like, I'm not going to go to the wedding then because I'm not an aristocrat. And Leto's like, fucking,
Yeah.
you thought.
Yeah, which I think is poignant too, because You think aristocrat and you just think like, oh yeah, stuffy politician in a room somewhere, an academic of some sort, a lawyer. But aristocrats can exist in the military, in
Yeah.
the private sector as well, right? Business minded folks who are still adhering to aristocratic, old fashioned conservative thinking.
Yeah.
And Duncan happens to be one of those military aristocrats, old fashioned thinking.
And if we're thinking about barriers and resistant to change, Duncan's the one we've been following along this whole book, going, ew, shit's different now?
Right.
Oh, God. Ew, women? But what about gays? It's like,
yeah, exactly.
afraid of just so much change. So, yeah.
Totally. So there you go. Takeaway number 1, folks. Aristocrats. A lot of ideas about them that Leto and Frank really had to get off their chest.
Pretty poignant stuff.
Yeah.
Now, for our second takeaway today, we wanted to dwell for another moment on words.
Oh.
And I have the sneaking suspicion we're going to come back to this at some point before the book's over. But we've talked already at length about Leto's stance on words. But from today's reading, Leto's meeting with Moneo reveals an interesting balance between kind of spoken and unspoken, and then also where different characters kind of focusing their energies. And we just wanted to talk about it.
Yeah.
And I'll also point out that where we see a lot of characters really focus on what are the words that are being said, this is another way in which we can continue to see Hui Nari standing apart from the crowd, because she so often focuses on what her part is moving forward and doesn't get wrapped up in semantics in a way that's like really refreshing. And I think refreshing for Leto as well.
Right.
Because the words aren't the point. And that's Leto's point. So Moneo rolls into this meeting fucking hard. Just focusing. Yeah, he's hard. He's very sexually excited. All this talk of words. He just loves letters in orders. And after all, one of his core fears in this scene, in this chapter, is what is being said about the God Emperor now that the marriage has been announced. Right? Across 2 pages, Moneo literally brings up that, quote, the Tleilaxu lies will be believed, quote, what they're saying in the city, and finally, that they will laugh at Leto and, quote, make obscene jests.
Ooh, they'll be slinging those words, baby.
They're going to be throwing words. Leto's like, why? Does it look like I care? Did I give you reason to think I care? And even Moneo's goal in this is, I need an explanation. I need you to tell me what's happening. I need you to give me words so that I can feel good about what's happening.
Yeah.
And it's revealing how, despite being Leto's like number 1 trusted confidant, that Moneo still leans so heavily on words to settle his anxieties. Like, he's thinking in very articulated terms, how do I settle these fears and kind of quell these fears?
Yeah.
He's been to every TED Talk and he's still thinking about this. Now, Leto does his normal thing in this scene. He sidesteps questions, he rolls, he uses agility, and his speed greatly rises. And after Leto admits his wedding won't be conventional, Moneo, quote, wrestled with things he could only feel and not express.
Ooh.
End quote. Which really stands out in a chapter where it's all expression. It's all, I'm saying this because I think this. And then he has these feelings and he cannot express them.
Yeah.
And whether he doesn't feel he has permission or he doesn't have the vocabulary to kind of encapsulate, because it's following Leto saying he's not entirely primate anymore.
Yeah.
So Moneo going, oh, I have feelings. How do I say that? And when he finally gathers his wits enough to ask some practical questions, Leto drops some fucking bars. Leto says Moneo, quote, has names and verbs and modifiers with which he can perform. The words will work for him in their usual ways. Moneo may never glimpse the transcendental potential of his words, but he well understands their everyday mundane uses. I, on the other hand, feel that words are mostly useful if they open for me a glimpse of attractive and undiscovered places. Come on. But the use of words is so little understood by a civilization which still believes unquestioningly in a mechanical universe of absolute cause and effect. obviously reducible to one single root cause and one primary seminal effect. End quote. God damn.
Wow.
Yeah. That acapella lacking a beat track is hot. And it also seems to me like, in the same way that the Iron Curtain, right, jab is very like Frank living in that moment.
Right.
It seems like this is taking a jab at the mechanical universe view, which I've heard like Alan Watts talk about, but in general, it was a 16th, 17th century idea and framework that you can explain pretty much everything in the universe through simple cause and effect.
Yeah.
And it was super useful for like figuring out physics and shit. But when it comes to like electromagnetism and quantum physics and things like relative experiences and subjectivity and even conversations about free will,
right,
people have broadly moved past a purely mechanical view of the universe.
Yeah.
So this idea of like a civilization which still fully believes unquestioningly in this sort of cause and effect relationship, words are very poorly understood. The power of words and the sort of like potent use of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And with his emphasis on the use of words, I want to bring back a quote from a much earlier chapter with Sister Chenoweth, quote, "The only past which endures lies wordlessly within you," end quote. Like the use of words is in spite of the past that endures. And it's that sort of, that's the disconnect. And that's his ultimate thesis, the mystery of the universe that he reveals to Chenoweth. But it's also like, that's kind of the point of it all.
Yeah, I love that you went back and found those quotes with Sister Chenoweth, because that's going to come up again later too. I think these two ideas are very relevant. What he's telling Moneo here and what he told her on the road.
Yeah.
Now, after Leto's defense of idle thinking and that whole conversational bit about wool gathering, Moneo is just sort of processing. He's literally thinking about the word words.
Words. Just panicking.
And Leto continues, though. He powers through his TED Talk. Quote, "Words are often almost useless in sentient affairs. Throughout our history, the most potent use of words has been to round out some transcendental event, giving that event a place in the accepted chronicles, explaining the event in such a way that ever afterward we can use those words and say, 'This is what it meant.' That's how events get lost in history." End quote. Holy shit,
God
drop the mic.
Damn. That's such a condemnation. It is dripping with how inadequate it is.
Yeah.
Right? So many rounding out the event, giving it a place in the accepted chronicles, the like consensus chronicles, the oral history, explaining it ever afterward, never to be questioned again.
Ooh.
We can say, this is what it's like.
Right. We
how
can put
petty.
the big red stamp on it that says done.
That was a good day. It's like,
right.
Yeah. And we'll never think again about it. It's
amazing. It's such a philosophical view of history and how we interpret history as humanity and how we chronicle events that happen to us and around us.
Yeah.
And Leto's ultimate point here is that attempting to chronicle those things by using mere words is an act of reduction, right? Because it is impossible to truly capture those things simply by using words.
Right.
And this is very similar to what he said to Sister Chenoweth as well. Quote, "The truth always carries the ambiguity of the words used to express it." End quote.
Yeah.
Amazing stuff. I mean, this was such a fundamental idea that stuck with me. I was traveling while we were working on this script and reading these chapters. So I was visiting a lot of museums and palaces and castles and statues with history written on them and this and that. And
Abu went to South Dakota.
Right.
He went to Missouri.
Yeah, right in where you think I was. And which shouldn't be very hard to figure out if you just follow me on Twitter. But regardless, I really kept thinking back to Frank/Leto's ideas here about history and how we capture it and how trying to write it down is reductive in and of itself because it simply can't capture the whole truth. It was really fascinating. It kind of like took me out of the experience, not in a wholly bad way, but in a way where I was like walking around a museum being like, we're sort of just saying, putting a stamp on this and saying that this is what this meant. We all agree. The 2 thumbs up. And like, it could have meant a million different other things, or the history could be viewed in a million different ways. It goes back to that idea about how history is written by the victors. History is just sort of an accepted chronicle of events that we've all agreed on, or that a majority of us have agreed on enough to settle down on paper and put in books and to try and make sense of those events, you know? And it goes back to that idea of the mechanical universe, right? Trying to chronicle history is a lot of trying to untangle cause and effect.
Right.
The Geneva Convention happened, and so that led to World War II. The dropping of the bombs equals Cold War. You know, we draw these parallels and connections to try and make sense of history, when in reality, there's so much more to it than can be captured on the page in mere words.
Yeah. I also really find myself these days, in regards to a lot of things, whether it's like love or jobs or friendship or anger or sadness, just experiences in general. When you try to capture the entirety of an experience, whatever it is, in words, and you say, have I done an adequate job of capturing every nuance of that experience? For myself, almost every single time without exception, I haven't even come close.
Right.
And it can be really overwhelming. I had something of a spice experience pretty recently.
Yeah.
And I was looking at how vivid the trees looked, how green and beautiful the trees looked.
Uh-huh.
And I thought to say out loud, wow, the trees are beautiful. Like, wow, look at those trees.
Yeah.
Dang,
Dang,
trees.
bro.
Dang, bro, you got some leaves on you, tree man. But
such inadequate words.
Because again, it's like the true, most vivid expression of reality is one that utterly defies language.
Yeah.
And I think that we do a pretty good job of functionally getting through the world. Look how far our species has come.
Yeah.
I don't mean to shit talk language. What a stupid thing that would be to do. But
right.
It is something that has given me pause frequently recently. This idea of language and words being inadequate and being ambiguous, and how heavily we rely on them in situations where like everything is on the line. Work meetings that become fights. Fucking why? No one's job is worth being upset about, especially in like the world of retail. It's like no one fucking at an Apple store, no one should ever care.
Right.
And yet people end up in like arguments. Right. And it's like, just take a step back, realize that you're using the wrong words, and start again. It's not that hard.
Yeah.
I have like 3 coworkers that if they listen to this, they might be like, is he talking about me? Yes, I am talking about you. Anyway, back to Dune. It's really fascinating to hear Leto talk about this and to put it in these terms, because again, it is this sort of thesis that he returns to over and over again, but he's adding more clarity to it each time he returns to it.
Yeah.
And again, even the journals that he's writing to course correct humanity are, as he said in the past, more words. He's like a pragmatist when it comes to these tools.
Yeah.
Now, to kind of wrap up this sprawling takeaway, in these moments where characters are sort of approaching Leto, going, yo, bro, what the fuck? Explain to me, please. Tell me what's happening.
Right.
I want to know why.
Right.
Give me the A, the B, and then the C. So many of them find themselves wrestling with their own words thrown back at them or questioned by the God Emperor.
Yeah.
He's like, why do you think that is? Have you ever thought about this? And they're like, oh, why are we talking about that? You know, he's like, oh, by the way, Adam was the one who ate the apple and then he did a kickflip. Think about that, Monet. I was like, what the fuck is happening? I don't know. It's like, it's very clear that the God Emperor is teaching a lesson, not by what he says, but by what he does. And this process of like, don't lean so heavily on words is one that he's kind of going through with his most trusted, kind of valued subjects and loyal friends.
Yeah.
And in this chapter with Moneo and that chapter so long ago with Sister Chenua, both characters find themselves kind of bumping up against the limit of words, their inability to express certain things. Genoa experienced the, quote, wordless truth, end quote. That sort of indescribable experience of camaraderie and friendship with Leto when he's like, yeah, you're going to die, but we're both going to be in history forever. And she's like, oh, shit. Did we just become friends? What is this? And then Moneo, quote, felt beaten down by these words, terrified by unspoken things they might make him think, end quote. And listen, like, Leto has said over and over again that he'll teach humanity a lesson their bones will remember. Not the history textbooks, not their oral traditions, their bones. It'll be a species-wide lesson. And when Moneo gets a sense of terrible unspoken things, and we've also been told in this chapter that, like, Leto conditioned Moneo to be particularly sensitive to his own inner workings, I kind of get the sense that this is Moneo brushing up against the golden path and also kind of feeling his incompatibility with it. Like, I am an aristocrat. Right. The core of my being, the core of my instincts, all of those things are incompatible with the unimaginable change that's about to rock the universe.
Right. I am not the future of humanity as envisioned by my God.
And that sort of making him think those things, questioning his very core, his marriage to duty and responsibility, all of that stuff, it's there. And that's maybe that terrible thing that he's avoiding. And to contrast against him, the chapter ends, perhaps Siona.
Ooh.
So, very
Perhaps
cool.
Siona.
Perhaps Siona. We'll have to read more of this book, I guess.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
Wow. Yeah. It's a really dense and provocative idea about words and history. And it's something that's come up before. And like you said, it is certainly something that will come up more in the book. And I'm sure we'll be revisiting the idea more and more as we get more examples of it. But it's intense stuff. I mean, again, I was reading these chapters on a trip and just thinking about them in real world context. And that's more than I can ask from most books, you know, to affect me on a day-to-day basis and rewire how I see the world.
I was going to say, sounds like Frank did something right.
Yeah, down to my very bones.
You're going to remember this book in your bones. You bastard.
Yeah, bastard.
Jesus, Frank.
Wow,
all right.
aggressive.
I probably will. I walked into the room hard. What can I say?
Jesus. Down to your boner.
You're going to remember this story in your boner. Well, that was our second takeaway on that nice, mature final note. That was our second takeaway. We have some ooey gooey, delicious spice morsels.
Yes.
For those of you who are hard enough to eat them.
Oh, no.
But before we serve them up, we're going to take a final quick break. So don't go anywhere. When we're back, we're going to serve up. It's time to eat.
Yum.
Right after this.
Welcome back, folks. Let's round out this episode with our delicious spice morsels, starting with morsel number 1, face dancer fertility.
Ooh, are they hard enough?
Ooh. So Leto tells Duncan in today's reading that, quote, the face dancers of the Beni Tleilax are a colony organism. Individually, they are mules, end quote.
Right.
And if you recall, earlier in the book, Moneo said something very similar when talking to Duncan about the Tleilaxu. Quote, their face dancers are mules, closer to a colony organism than to human, end quote. Really parroting the God Emperor.
Right.
Now, we did an entire episode dedicated to the face dancers, but just in case you missed it, here is a quick breakdown of what Leto and Moneo mean when they called the face dancers mules and colony organisms. To begin, let's define the word mule, because in this context, it means, quote, the offspring of a donkey and a horse, typically sterile and used as a beast of burden, end quote.
Right.
Now, knowing that definition, that is spot on in reference to the face dancers, because they are sterile beings that are used as tools of espionage and statecraft by the Tleilaxu masters. The Dune Encyclopedia tells us that the face dancers were, quote, a major arm in the enforcement of Tleilaxu foreign policy, end quote. So they're a critical tool by Tleilaxu leadership.
Right.
Now, the reason they're sterile is because of all of the bioengineering and genetic tampering that's done to them before birth. In short, all of the face dancers are equipped with both male and female genitalia so that they're able to impersonate anyone, anywhere, anytime. But the process that gives them all of those organs also strips away their ability to procreate.
Right.
Now, this also explains why Leto and Moneo refer to them as colony organisms, because face dancers are just one part of a larger functional Tleilaxu society, and they have little to no independence. And what really makes them a colony organism is the fact that if they were to actually cut themselves off from the society to leave the colony that birthed them, they effectively wouldn't be able to survive beyond a single generation due to the fact that they're sterile. They wouldn't be able to break away from Tleilax and create their own society because of the way they are created. So in short, the face dancers are a tool that is bred and created by the Tleilaxu masters for a singular purpose, much in the same way that a colony of insects will often be broken up into castes where you have your warriors and you have your workers and your breeders and you have the one queen that they're all in service of. That colony has a bunch of individual pieces and parts that all serve a particular purpose, but those parts could not break off on their own and continue to exist. And the face dancers very much fit that mold in Tleilaxu society.
Very neat. Well, our second morsel today, Duncan's usefulness.
Hey!
Oh my gosh. Leto's empire runs on Duncan.
Hello.
In today's reading, Leto explains to a frustrated Duncan that he is immeasurably useful, and this is why he continues to resurrect Golas.
Yeah.
Now, he doesn't really explain what he means by this. He's just like, yeah. But luckily for us, the Dune Encyclopedia's got our back.
Yes.
Gives us way more information than you ever thought you needed about the many Duncan Golas and their contributions. So let's talk about some of the cool shit that previous Duncan Golas have done during Leto's reign.
Yeah.
Duncan's like, I don't want to leave behind bastard children. And Leto's like, cool. What about sculpture? Oh, because, believe it or not, there was a Duncan Gola musician and a Duncan Gola sculptor. Artistes, plural, indeed. And to start off, sculptor Duncan gained renown through the Empire for his work.
Oh.
But ended up crushed to death by his partially finished statue of Stilgar.
Oh my god.
The poetic irony. I'm sure he would have been into it.
Yeah.
I'm sure he would have been like, actually, that's a great artwork.
Yeah.
That's a great artwork. Being
Right.
crushed by, okay.
My
cool.
final piece is a performance piece.
Suddenly it is. It wasn't intended to be, but it was, which is very fun, especially because, again, probably these are Golas grown of the flesh of the Duncan that was killed by Stilgar.
Right.
And actually, his greatest accomplishment and contribution to the Empire was being responsible for the architecture of On.
Hello.
So,
the Festival City.
The Festival City. So everything that we saw where they're looking at this big thing, that everyone's got a balcony facing toward the center plaza,
Yeah.
how cool and weird it sounds, all of that was constructed by one of the Duncans,
Yeah.
who was a renowned architect and sculptor. Super cool.
Yeah.
The Frank Lloyd Wright of Duncan Golas.
Amazing. It also makes me chuckle at the chapter a few episodes ago where Leto and Duncan are looking at a giant blueprint of On while they go over the security features. And it's Duncan just looking at a previous Duncan's work in front of him.
Yeah. Duncan's like, what's that signature in the bottom? Leto's like, it's not really important. Anyway, so we're going to go down this hallway. And Duncan might have also perked up his ears a little bit because he's like, what is that Balisette recording going on in the lobby?
Okay.
The like waiting music in the lobby?
Yeah.
It's really good. It sounds better than possibly Gurney.
Hello.
Hard to imagine. Well, that's musician Duncan.
Yeah.
Who is said to have been the greatest Balisette player in history.
Oof.
Perhaps even better than Gurney Halleck.
Tough look for our guy.
I mean, when you have that much sex, he's like 9 strings. I could do it with 12. You should see how agile these fingers are. Indeed. And in fact, he was so good, and his recordings of the Balisette were so beautiful, that Leto actually kept recordings alongside his journals in Dar es Balat, which is just very, very sweet to hear. Again, you think about like the golden vinyl records, I think, that we put out in space. It's like, what is the music we want to preserve for future, antiquity, or like just so people know?
Yeah.
Leto's like, what music is important for people to hear in some thousand years? This fucking guy on the Balisette, holy shit, let's lay some tracks down. Yeah, it's awesome. And then, of course, as you can expect, there were a number of military-minded Duncan Golas who had a large impact. One badass named Duncan Arctrader led a coup against the God Emperor early in his reign and actually got really, really close to killing Leto II Atreides using, you'll never guess, a stone burner.
Amazing.
It almost worked on Paul. Throwback. He believes in nostalgia. He's golden oldies. He's like, you know this one. Now, this scared Leto enough to create the all-female army known as the Fish Speakers, and to make sure that they were bred to be stronger than Duncan, Idaho. So this Arctrader actually did shape quite a bit of the modern military force of Leto's empire. Not only the Fish Speakers, but also the fact that they are bred and conditioned over their many, many, many iterations to be faster and more powerful than Duncan, Idaho. There were also Golas like General Duncan and Cyborg Duncan, who had a hand in training the Fish Speakers to be the mighty force they are today.
Yeah.
And I'll also point out that Cyborg Duncan improved the Fish Speaker training so much that Leto II ignored the number of cadets and officers he killed in trainings or duels.
Incredible.
I can imagine his major domo at the time going, he killed another one. Oh, I didn't hear you over the sound of how good he is.
Yeah.
Go
Incredible.
away. He's really good. Yes. Insane. Kind of reminds me of football players. You throw enough touchdowns, you can murder like 2 people, and it's fine. I mean, am I wrong?
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
You're like, all right, don't do that again. There's some comedian said that. I didn't make that up. I'm not that creative. I don't want to take credit for someone else's jokes. Point is, there were lots of Duncan Golas. And in fact, we talked about 17 of them in our episode about the many lives of Duncan, Idaho. So if that sounds interesting to you, if you haven't seen it, check out that episode. It's a lot of fun. And that's our takeaway today. So thinking back on this book, recall the blueprint scene. That's amazing. Duncan's being impressed by these Fish Speakers and their ability to use weapons. All of these can be tied back to different moments of Duncan, Idaho Golas contributing to Leto's empire.
Right. They're endlessly useful.
Endlessly useful.
And that wraps up today's episode, folks. We did it.
Woo! Yep. Made it.
A big one, a good one, a philosophical one, a deep one,
Indeed.
a delicious one.
Scrumdiddlyumptious one.
Well, we have some homework for you.
Yeah.
As always, we got to keep trucking along through this book. So for the next episode, make sure that you have read chapters 33 and 34. Or if you have a different copy of the book, just read through the chapter that ends on the sentence. Quote, "When we meet again, we will really learn what you are made of." End quote. That sounds like a damn threat.
I say that every time I stop hanging out with someone for a little bit. I'm like, okay. Hey, it was really fun to get a beer. When we meet again, we're going to find out what you're
really made of. I love it. Yeah. It's never goodbye. It's when we meet again, we will find out what you're really made of.
And dear listeners, when we meet again, we'll find out what you're really made of. But before we let you go, we have some outro to take care of. So best way to support us. Let's start there. Consider becoming a patron.
That's right.
Patreon.com/GomJabar. Not one of the other Patreon websites. Not one of the other creators. No. Cancel your subscriptions to them. redirect that money toward us. Jokes aside, you do get some cool benefits. Ad-free episodes, extra clips, bloopers, things like that. We're talking about doing a live recording soon. That should be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And in general, we coordinate things on the Discord. Maybe even a Dune Part 2 watch party.
Oh.
All in person in New York.
That's
Sounds
right.
dope.
Sounds
You don't
dope.
want to not hear about that. Consider becoming a patron. Patreon.com/GomJabar.
That's right. And another great way to support us is to get yourself some Dune-themed merch from our merch store at gomjabarshop.com, where we've got art and apparel and mugs and a tote bag and so much more. So treat yourself to something nice. It's been a hot, long, sweaty-ass summer,
True.
and you deserve some beautiful Dune merch. gomjabarshop.com.
One of the designs is so good, we got a tweet at us that someone wants to get it tattooed.
Yeah.
So
That's compliments to you. It's one of your designs, Leo. Someone wants
am
a
so
tattoo
sorry
of
to
it
that
on
person.
their body. Yeah.
But you know what?
I think you,
I'll
as
take
the
it.
designer, get to tell them where on their body they have to get the tattoo.
Eyelid.
You reserve the
Eyelid.
rights. Oh,
Yeah.
oh yeah? Ow.
Right eyelid.
Ow, what? Ow, now my eye's hurting.
No, just kidding. They can get it wherever they want. There's places you can get it. Great. Well, we love to hear from you.
We do.
Let's say you just got a tattoo
Yes.
of one of my artworks and you want to show me. Best place to send that picture, as long as it's work appropriate, gomjabarpodcast@gmail.com.
That's right.
That's the email address. You can send us your questions, your feedback, your comments, your concerns, your, I don't know, your favorite movies that just got delayed, your favorite games that just got announced for 1.0 releases, whatever it is.
That's right.
You can hit us up, gomjabarpodcast@gmail.com.
A great way to keep in touch.
Moneo walked into the room so hard.
So hard.
Leto was like, Moneo, why are you so hard? Moneo's like, tell me
Is that
words.
concern for my announced betrothal in your pocket? Or are you just happy to see me?
Moneo's like, no, I'm anxious.
This just happens when I get anxious.
It's an anxious boner. Ah!
Well, friends, there is no real ending. It's just the place where you stop the recording. But this podcast is always one step beyond logic. So help spread the word of Muad'Dib and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And be sure to check out the other shows on the Lore Party Podcast Network on loreparty.com. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at lore_party. We're also on TikTok at Gamjabar Podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, whoever controls the podcast controls the universe. We'll see you on the golden path.